You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. Before we dive into this powerful episode, please remember to subscribe to our channels and to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes and to continue hustling. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Sherman College of Chiropractic, New Patients in a Box, the Influencer Authority Podcast Training, Mango Voice, Community Healthcare Resources, Life Chiropractic College West. Let's hustle.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 411 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I'm your producer, Luke Millette, and here's your host, James Chester.
So today we had the opportunity of interviewing Dr. Brett McDonough, and if you want to hear the story of how to turn the crank and have conviction, stay tuned. Welcome back. This is another episode of the Chiro Hustle podcast. This is 411. I have Dr. Brett McDonough coming in from Iowa today, which I'm really excited. If you guys didn't know, I'm an Iowa guy too. So it should be a really cool conversation today. Before we get into this episode, I just want to let people know why we do what we do. We protect freedom of speech in chiropractic. Medical freedom is important to us. We protect the sacred trust. If you guys don't know what that is, go to your favorite search engine and look for BJ Palmer Sacred Trust. We support subluxation-based chiropractic and innate and universal intelligence, and that when someone gets adjusted, it connects man or woman, the physical, to man or woman, the spiritual. With that being said, we got Dr. Brett McDonough. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, buddy. Glad to be here.
Yeah. I was reading your bio and I was really impressed, and I was like, man, this guy is he's done a lot in the world and helped a lot of people, and he's a great business guy. So I think that'd be really cool to let people know a little bit more about you. And maybe if we could just jump into your origin story about chiropractic. That's one of people's favorite parts of our show, is even if they don't listen to the whole episode, they like to hear the chiropractor story because it's usually relevant to them either in business or in life. And sure. I really like that part. But just to reframe this for you, I know I mentioned this to you off camera, but your friends, your family, your practice member, your colleagues, they're all going to listen to this, and maybe they know your story somewhat, but they might not know the story you're going to tell today. So Let's just jump on into it. Yeah,
for sure. And I mean, I don't have any like extreme, like this was like a BJ Palmer toggle type story by any means, but I went to college to be a teacher. I wanted to coach. I wrestled all the way through high school into college, and obviously through that and sports and things like that, I really kind of messed myself up. And I remember it was like my sophomore year. And again, it was the beginning of my sophomore year. I think it was first semester. I messed up my neck during wrestling practice. I could barely use my right hand. I could barely hold a pen during class. And then my coach at the time, this old school guy, Al Baxter, been around forever. Everybody in Iowa who's a wrestling fan knows Al. And he's like, go see one of them chiropractors. And I'm like, oh, how do you spell that? But so anyways, I got connected with a guy that he knew, went down there. It was the first time anybody had ever really kind of like shown me chiropractic at that point. I'd been to a chiropractor when I was a kid in high school here and there, very symptomatic based type care. My chiropractor as a kid as well too, actually was the head of the U.S. Olympic medical team here recently, Bill Moreau. And Bill was my chiropractor when I was a kid. But again, it was one of those deals where it was very symptomatic based type care, which again, everybody does their stuff a little bit different. But this guy, all of a sudden, he's like, here's your problem. Not only are you having a symptom from this, but this is the other things that it affects. And it kind of turned my light bulbs on a little bit. He adjusted me, obviously got better pretty quick from it, and just started talking to this guy a little bit more. And I was really, at the time, was going through a kind of a shadowing deal for teaching in a small town of Iowa. And I remember sitting there thinking, this won't work. Like, I'll kill one of these little kids before I teach them anything at that point. Even this was 20 years ago, and it hasn't got any better. But long story short, went on spring break that year. I still remember driving back. I was north of my hometown, about 15, 20 miles. I was going around this curve. I remember thinking to myself, you know what? I'll be a chiropractor. And as to why that happened right then and there, I have no clue. I got back to school. I ended up changing my last. We had this May term class deal. It was like an extra class. So I threw another science class on top of it, piled a bunch of science courses over the next couple of years, ended up at chiropractic school. Got there, still didn't really understand why the hell I was there at that point. I had a couple great mentors that showed up at the right time about trimester 4 when you're about ready to quit, because all you're doing is studying and taking tests and hating life at that point. I was good at taking tests. I was good at drinking beer when I was in chiropractic school that first year. And that's about all I did. And a couple of guys lit me on fire, really told me the story. I realized it was more than what I'd signed up for, which is that's what I needed at that point. And the rest is kind of history. We just really took off at that point. And kind of what we were talking about before, I started just shadowing docs, going out and screening for them, helping out in their offices, doing whatever I could do outside of school to really get myself dipped into what real chiropractic was versus what I thought it was in school at that point. That was the game changer for me then.
Really important, valuable lessons there, because I think that there's a lot of students that listen to our show and a lot of chiropractic assistants that listen to our show and a lot of struggling DCs also. So I think it's really, it shows a lot of integrity to say we don't know what we don't know until we need to know it.
Yep, for sure. We've had a couple, I just hired another doc in our clinic. We've hired 2 docs in the last year on our team that were both patients of mine back when they were in high school. And it's just neat to see come full circle now at this point. But I remember every time we get a kid in here that wants to go to school and they're like, got any advice? And I'm just like, don't study too much. Go out and talk to people that are out there that have done it before, that have done it better, or have made the mistakes you're going to end up making, because that'll save you a whole heck of a lot of sweat equity at the end of the day at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I got too deep into school that first little bit, and you finally realize that's not what it's all about.
Yeah. I mean, listening to what you're saying, it just really resonates with our listeners, because I think that most of the time people don't understand that they should be promoting from within, and they should be really nurturing people into positions for future, position. And I think I've heard a lot of chiropractors tell me, you know what, how many chiropractors I created, how many people I sent to school. And I'm like, all right, well, where's your empire? Like, why didn't you learn how to make those people into a brand and build business around that, and actually enterprise with other people that have trusted you their entire life, that have worked for you as CAs, that have been under care with you for a decade? Like,
full circle.
How did we miss that part?
Yep. 100% agree. And you know, those people coming back, they're drinking the same Kool-Aid you're drinking at that point. And they've got a somewhat of a you know where they're coming from, you know, their family as well too, and how they think and how they operate. It makes you feel so much more comfortable with those people.
Well, people talk all the time about generational wealth. Something I really like is generational health. And why wouldn't you bring people in that already had these deep-rooted healthy habits that were part of their life for, working at your office or they're being under your care? So I think what you're talking about is really cool. But I know you've done well with business also. And I know that's a place in chiropractic that we should probably talk more about. When I was first starting to go to, I went to these groups called EPOC, which was for Epicenter of Chiropractic. And I was just like a tech working in an office, but I'd go to all of these and I'd meet like leaders in the profession, and I was just blown away. Like, I was like such a newbie. And when I went to these events, I would like learn from these people about business. And I think one of the things I learned was people are like, don't talk about numbers when you come to these events. And I'm like, why the heck is that like some like secret thing that people shouldn't talk about success or struggles? Like, how are you going to be an advocate for one of your brothers or sisters unless you talk real?
Yep.
Like, just don't come here and fill your notebook up with somebody pontificating about the profession, but like, be there for each other.
Yep. You want to know how it works behind the scenes. How does the motor actually run at that point in time on something like that? I agree. EPOC was great on there, and a lot of the speakers you hear over time, and you said it there as well too, like, what's the real deal? Like, how do you get below just the surface, the hood ornament side of it? I want to lift the hood up, and I want to see how that motor runs a little bit. And that's how you really learn.
Well, that's one of the things I tell people, Dr. Brett, is you should take out people in your local like community, different successful business owners or different chiropractors. Get to know them, take them out for a coffee, take them out for a lunch, and really like build a relationship with people in your local community, other successful people, find out what's working for them,
Yep.
go out and meet other chiropractors. And you know what? I guarantee you they need to get adjusted too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To your point there as well, too, I think something that's shifted me, and I've had to kind of re-examine this recently, but it's like, I don't know who the heck said it originally, but it's like, look at the 5 closest people around you, you are equivalent to that. And it's like, how do you continue to raise that crowd? And I've learned it's like, who are the people outside even of my profession that challenge the heck out of me in terms of just how they carry themselves, the character that they have, the vision they have with stuff, their level of discipline that they have, the level of conviction behind what they do. Even if it's something I don't even completely agree with, I'm attracted to people who they are all in, 100% in. And even if it's on a complete opposite side of a political side, or I even look at the last COVID stuff. I mean, you know what? I respect you if your choice for what you do is different than mine, but you are grounded in something that you see as being truthful to you at that point. You may be blowing smoke, but at the end of the day, you get what I'm saying. But I just finding people who are at a level that is higher than you in some capacity is so refreshing.
Well, I think that you're hitting the nail on the head is you have to have choice and you have to choose. And like I was telling you off camera, I was like, I chose to go an inch wide and a mile deep with chiropractic. Yeah. And most of the time people go a mile wide and an inch deep with everything in their life. And they wonder why they never become well-known in anything they do or an expert in anything they touch.
Absolutely.
So you grew up, you said wrestling, individual skill sport.
Yep.
Do you think that upbringing and sports background helped you become a successful businessman and chiropractor?
100% agree. It's one of the things we look for with anybody we hire anymore is like a sports background to some level. I mean, you get it with the soccer side as well too. Like wrestling is one of those sports, like the level of accountability for the outcome, there's nothing greater because there's no one else out there with you. It's mano y mano at the end of the day. It's if I didn't prepare myself well enough, if I'm not conditioned well enough, if I'm not mentally tough enough in that circumstance and I lose, there's no one else I can point the finger at that point in time. There's just a level of buy-in with it. And I think a lost art in our society anymore is that the willingness to go through a little bit of suffering to get what it is that you want. There's a fine line there with it. But at the end of the day, like I think of wrestling, like cutting weight, like half the battle of winning that match that day was whether you made weight before. And making weight was not stepping on a scale that morning. It was the 2 or 3 days leading up to that and the ability to keep yourself disciplined to do what you needed to do to be able to step on the mat to begin with. It's that preparation piece that happens with it. I mean, we go to the NCAA wrestling tournament a lot. Almost every year we try to go, a group of us guys, and you see a guy's hand get raised, or you see the Olympics and a guy's hand get raised, and you think about what it took to get to that point, the amount of sacrifice they made to get to that point. It's not just that match. It's the last, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. The last year, the last month, the last 5 years. It's the kid who was 4 years old, put on his first wrestling singlet, and he's like, I'm going to be in the Olympics someday. And I'm like, they had a vision and they fought the fight all the way through. They kept overcoming some adversity through it. And other people quit and they did. They kept going. It's just something, I don't know. There's something about sport that teaches you that if you allow it to. It's a choice, like you said before.
Well, is it okay if I share a couple of stories?
For sure, man.
The hardest thing I ever did in sports my entire life was junior high wrestling and wrestling camp through 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Because I was like the class before we went into high school. I was the last like freshman class in like middle school.
Yep.
And I wrestled those 3 years. I didn't when I went to high school because I went in more serious about football and soccer. And one of the things I learned though is that competition, there's nothing greater than losing. There's nothing greater than knowing that guy at the opposing school is going to kick and win. You know, there's nothing greater than to know that you have fear in your heart about the guy that trains harder than you, that works harder than you, and that is going to beat you.
Yep.
And you know it.
Yep.
There's nothing that's going to separate you from losing
Yep.
until you start working harder,
Yep.
until you go and surprise them, until you wake up earlier and train more, until you start learning from a different mentor, a different coach. And then you go in there with that same fear in your heart, but you win.
Yep.
That's something really special, man. And that's what I love about your story too, is, you know, growing up in Iowa myself, we're known for our wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really cool to know that you've been in touch with the NCAA group.
A quote that I've always, I've got it hanging on my wall. Dan Gable said it though. Once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy. And it's just that comparative thing of like, what are you willing to put yourself in? Like you said, like when you walk out there and you know you're going to get your rear end handed to you, but you still walk out there and you walk off, and the girls you've been chasing are sitting in the stands. Your parents are in the stands. Your buddies are in the stands, and you walk out and you get your tail kicked, but you still show up with a smile the next day. Like there's a level of integrity there that not a whole lot of things can match.
I mean, I'm the first to tell you, like it brings back like flashbacks of going against guys that I knew that were just better trained than me. And I knew that I was coming into a fight that I wasn't going to win.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I never made it to state, but you know, the other side of the story is you're talking about this 4-year-old kid that says they're going to, you know, win and become number one someday. I was talking to my buddy this morning when we were going to the gym. I was like, it's not just the kid that podiums. It's the parents. It's the grandparents. It's the uncle that bought the singlet. It's the family that drove them to the meets, that got them special coaching. We were talking about baseball, and I'm like, it's not the hitter that wins the game. It's not the pitcher that wins the game. It's the hitting coach that works for the manager that wins the game. It's the pitching coach that works for the team that wins the game. Like it's much more than just the win. It's all those people that Sherpa that person to the top of the mountain.
For sure, man. That's the part that makes sports fun, that whole team side of it that you develop over that time frame and realize you got to rely on that. And when things click, all of a sudden it's like, okay, that was worth it at that point.
You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Sherman College of Chiropractic, New Patients in a Box, the Influencer Authority Podcast Training, Mango Voice, Community Healthcare Resources, Life Chiropractic College West. Let's hustle. It's one of those things that we were talking about earlier too, is it's accountability. Like, you know, having the accountability to do your best in anything. I said before the little hiccup there, I said about chiropractic, I know it's a big question, but where do you see this profession moving towards in the next 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you asked it, because I just had this discussion with one of our other docs in here yesterday, actually. And I mean, again, I've said we're on the tipping point for the last 10 years, and we're still, I feel like, kind of there. I feel like COVID's almost helped us a little bit with people questioning traditional healthcare a little bit that's on there. I truly feel like it's going to come down to if there's enough loud voices out there within our profession that can tell a story that people can relate to, we start to become more of a first choice. As we always say in the office, like, how do we become people's first call, not their third call, or I've tried everything else, now I'm calling you guys type of thing. But also too, it's part of people's regimen. It's the gym membership mentality for people. And we've engineered our practice around that. And the practices over the years have been around creating lifetime patients out of it, and creating an environment that's conducive for that, and telling a story around it that feeds that as well too, and helps them understand, like, okay, why is this something that's part of, it's not a pill, but it's a lifestyle choice you're making as time goes on. I just hope that we haven't watered it down too much over the last X amount of time that makes that hill harder to climb. And I feel like the low hanging fruit of the insurance world and things like that have been conducive for people to want to go that opposite direction with it. But I really truly feel like chiropractic is going to continue to step forward. It is going to be dependent upon some strong leaders in our profession, though, and things like you're doing as well here too, that help people plug into a bigger story with it, a bigger vision with it. We're trying to engineer, again, a different way of doing what a group practice, for example, has done. Allow chiropractors to come in and practice in an environment that helps them get the most out of themselves without getting buried in the weeds so much, so they can be better at what they do, the art of what they do versus all the crap that goes on behind the scenes type of deal. So again, kind of a long, vague answer to it, but I really, truly feel like if we have a few leaders, and that's with anything out there, if you get a few strong leaders that show up and step up and are willing to kind of be at the front of the charge and get fired at over and over and over type of thing, you can get over that hurdle as well too. But we also need to start digging back into the schools and getting more involved in the schools and helping kids come out with a little fire in their belly. The things I was fortunate enough to get back 15 years ago.
Well, there's a couple things that you brought to my attention there, and we need to make sure that chiropractic's never looked at as the expensive Advil.
Yep.
And it's a lifestyle. It's not about your pain. It's about your performance. I think those are things that we have to like really integrate into the culture. And the power of what you're talking about is we need the leadership. I was at New Beginnings watching Eric Plasker speak a couple months back, and he said, "What is your message for chiropractic? I want you guys to all stand up right now and say it as loud as you can. I don't care if you guys hear the person next to you, but just say what is on your mind and chant it as many times as you want to." And my message was, "I will die on this hill."
Yeah.
And I think that medical freedom is that important to me. Yeah. And chiropractic in the medical freedom arena is that important to me. And that's why we perpetuate this message as hardcore as we do, as consistent as we do, because even this little bit that we're doing, it's a titration effect. It will eventually change the course of the way that our culture thinks in chiropractic about this profession.
Yep.
And if we stay energy rich with our message, eventually people, they can't ignore us.
Absolutely. And that's where it's great you said that as well too, because it is something that sometimes it feels overwhelming because you look around and you're like, man, I'm impacting how many hundreds of people a week when there's how many we have 500,000 people in Des Moines Metro now. And I think of that, I'm like, man, we got a lot of work to do, but it's just step by step. And how do you re-engineer your message to hit people in a way where they listen at that point? It's the whole idea of like the teacher will appear when the student's ready type of deal. The society has been primed here the last couple of years for people to start to seek something else out there. But to your point, we've got to get better with our message, more convicted to our message as well too. And what are you willing to, how far out there are you willing to put yourself? Even if it means, again, that you may lose a friend or two in the process or whatever. We care too much about being liked versus respected because we stand on a hill that we're willing to die on. It's a good way to put it.
I think that, me connecting with you today creates friendship for me. I see a guy that's just as committed as I am. And we were introduced by Jeffrey Slocum. So big shout out to you, Doc, for bringing Brett and I together. I can't say enough about just the level of intensity that guy has to make this profession better. So big shout out to him. Let's talk about your brands a little bit. I know you have a few clinics that you upstarted, and there's probably a big message in that for people to learn from.
Yeah. We started off kind of pretty simple when first got out of school. It was hang your shingle, get as many people through the door as possible, work 60, 70 hours a week. I enjoyed that. And I kind of got to a point though, I was like, okay, there's got to be a better way of doing this. So we started looking at like, okay, what's another way to rethink? Like everything I look at, I'm like, okay, how do you rethink this, reposition in a way where it catches people a little more where they're at and moves along in the journey? So that started first from a patient perspective where we really went to a membership-based model on stuff and brought them in, got them started, made it easy for them to continue. We really tried to speak their language chiropractically, but also from a financial perspective, from a technology perspective and implementing some different things with that. We opened up a handful of clinics, developed the doctors in there, and over the course of time, sold those clinics to the docs that were in there and kind of moved on to the next. Now we're really trying to speak the message now to docs that are out there of how do we do this in a better way? How do we make a bigger impact right now than we all are doing by ourselves, hanging a shingle up and then quote unquote competing with each other? Let's work together. I look at the clinics. We have a huge clinic system right across the road from us here. It's called the Iowa Clinic. Orthopedists in there, ENTs in there, all these specialists of all the different things they do. They're all under the same shingle. They all share resources to have a bigger brand, a bigger impact. And that's what we're really working on creating with our Delta Health side of stuff. We've got 6 docs now. And within that facility, within our facility, each one kind of specializes in different things to some degree on there. But we basically help handle all the back end, all the logistics for the docs, and allow them to be chiropractors, allow them to work on, you'd be really good at your art and be really good at communicating stuff. We create the platform for you and you start to just focus on that. Don't spend the other 50% of your time worrying about staff issues, worrying about all the marketing stuff and all the other pieces to it. And it's been something that really has started to gain some momentum. And I think it'll be something long-term wise that'll hopefully catch on elsewhere as well too.
I think it's really cool. It's profound to see people. I call it learning to teach. And you had to learn your method in order to teach your method. And now you're able to plug that into other people's lives and their abilities to participate in a bigger vision, which I think is really cool. I can't say enough about not overthinking the process when it comes to a chiropractor and finding systems that work for them. I think that so many times we lose chiropractors that go out there their own and they don't know how to build a practice. So I guess if we could, I'd like to go back a little bit into the questions. And if somebody were to like upstart today, like what is today, July 12th, 2022, what advice would you give them on building a practice of their dreams? And maybe if they're not thinking about like working within a unit like yours, say they're a solopreneur, what would you tell them to like really like help them?
Yep. And you kind of mentioned it before. I mean, one, you got to get really crystal clear first and foremost on what you're building. And by that, I simply mean like, what's the vision of this thing? Not just a goal, but at the end of the day, like, what are you going to be known for? What's your brand represent to begin with on there? What are you defined as? And really from there, in terms of like the nuts and the bolts of stuff, I mean, nothing tops networking and getting out and just getting in front of people, meeting your neighbors. And then you go back to the biblical principle of serve first and expect something in return after. I mean, really, honestly, not even expect them in return, but what are the things you get involved in, the groups you can get involved in to help out, volunteer your time, get out and talk to other groups as well too. Some of the people get so dependent upon social media to try to push their agenda or their story or run ads on this and run ads on that. Like, you can't tell your story just in those little pieces. Sometimes you've got to get out and get in front of people consistently and be a master of your craft. I mean, I love watching YouTube videos of chiropractors other places now that like seeing new techniques and learning new skill sets. And you kind of said it before as well, to be really, really, really damn good at what you do type of thing. When people come in, it's the Joe Stuckey was the guy I learned under up in Wisconsin. He practiced for 50 some years, studied under Clarence Gonstead and all these different things on there. But he always said, turn the crank or keep the faith, turn the crank and testify. And it's like, keep the faith, know exactly what you do and have 100% conviction of what you do. If you don't know why you're a chiropractor right now, get out to some of the things out there still. Get around some other chiropractors that are fired up at this point in time and rekindle that fire. Like I was thinking the other day, I'm like, I need to re-dip myself again. I get too busy with different things sometimes, and you kind of get detached from that a little bit. That's why I was excited even about this interview today. I'm like, it gets you back in remembering like why you got into it to begin with. But keep the faith part, understand why you do, turn the crank, do the work at the end of the day. You're not going to build a practice showing up at 8:00 in the morning and going home at 5 type of deal. If you're starting out, you got to get moving and narrow your hours down, shrink your schedule type of thing. get out there and meet people. And the whole testify thing, like, I mean, it's getting patients to start telling the story for you as well too out there. But it's the whole idea, like, people like to gather around a fire and watch it burn. And there's a lot of truth to that. Like, if you're excited about what you do and you got some gas on that fire, like we've got a new doc in here that started literally a couple weeks ago. And she loves chiropractic, and it has refired me up as well too. But it's amazing. Like, our system sends out requests for reviews and this and that to everybody that walks through the door. And she is kicking everybody's butt right now because she has so much fire over what she does. That one thing alone in itself will build a practice in so many different ways. You can hit them in the butt with a shovel and they'll get better. But that fire piece is the part that builds a practice.
Yeah. I think that's so important. Some of these things that you're sharing. And there's an old saying that's by, Think and Grow Rich, the guy that wrote that book, Napoleon Hill. And he said, if you give everything to everybody that they want, you'll never have to ask for anything.
Yeah.
And that's the law of reciprocity. It's Robert Cialdini's work. And it goes back to show that if you just continuously do what you enjoy doing, like us making this podcast, you can touch lives, and you get to involve yourself into a zone of genius that matters to you and other people. And you, like you said, you have to be crystal clear on why you do what you do, and then go be good at that. And don't be afraid to admit when you're not. Like,
for sure,
go and watch a YouTube video, go and mentor with somebody.
Yeah.
And I guess that gets us to the next section of today's interview is, who are some people besides Joe Stuckey? I think that's the name you mentioned, that you've looked up to or that have helped you become the doctor that you are today.
Yeah. I mean, I worked with Joe there, and then Jay LaGuardia also was involved in that practice. And Jay, he was very similar personality to mine, and kind of a hard driver type personality. And I learned a lot from Jay, and kind of how to manage myself as well too. That I go clear back to chiropractic school. Some of the people, Tim Fargo was another doc. It was in Minneapolis at the time, that just simplified everything for me. And that's one thing I will say as well too, to a new doc out there, like, don't overcomplicate this thing. I mean, keep practice simple. You don't need every fancy equipment and all these different things. Like, just keep practice simple on there. You need a set of hands, you need a table, and a front desk, basically. That's about all you need on something like that. Chris Cox was another guy that, again, really kind of showed me the ropes on how to tell a story back in the day. Chris practiced down in Phoenix area on stuff. I got involved in a couple quote unquote management groups that I got to a lot of seminars and things like that, like Master Circle back in the day. And they used to bring in so many different great people there that I just look up to. Carrie Swain is a doc that's in the Des Moines area here as well too. And she and I try to have lunch a couple times a year just to share ideas. And every time she asks me a question, what do I think? I'm like, why is she asking me? She's the person who I used to ask so many questions to, and still do to this day. But it's just funny how over time, like those mentors you had, you realize you kind of become a mentor as well too as you progress. And it's humbling, but at the same time, like you kind of said it as well too, is like, if you lose that desire to learn, it takes the fun out of it. Then at that point, then you're just going through the motions. And I really think, like, no matter who it is, like if you look at life in a way where every person you come across could teach you something in some capacity, every day is pretty damn fun at the end of the day. When you look back at it, you just got to be willing and open and humble enough to learn a lesson. And sometimes the lesson even is like, it's a tough circumstance of like, you know what, you're maybe arguing with somebody and you learn, like, you know what, they handled that way better than I did. I need to learn something from them about my emotional intelligence in regards to how I deal with that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've been a part of groups, and I've gone through with a lot of mentorship, and I've gone through with a lot of coaching. And I will tell you, every time I become the coach in the relationship eventually, because I learn enough that then I can see the holes in other people's game. And that's how you get better. You become the student. Back.
I can hear you here still.
Okay, I'm back. So let's close out today. But we close people out and maybe share with them a miracle story that you've seen.
Yeah. You hear me all right?
I gotcha.
Okay. Yeah. What's ironic is actually just this week we had one that was awesome in this practice. I still practice a couple days a week myself. I enjoy being with patients on and just staying plugged into that helps again keep a better eye on the bigger picture of stuff. But this patient I've seen now for I don't know, probably 7-8 years roughly, I guess. Pregnancy issues, couldn't get pregnant, and then they've gone through fertility stuff successfully but unsuccessfully 3 times now, and watching her go through that process and then get very hopeful and then to be let down at the end with a miscarriage and this and that. Just, I don't know. Having kids now, I can't imagine that feeling. Anyways, long story short, literally like 2 weeks ago, she came in to the office and she's like, I got something to tell you. I'm like, what's that? She goes, I'm pregnant. I'm like, I thought you were done with the whole fertility thing and this and that. She goes, this time we actually got pregnant the normal way. And I'm like, oh, the normal way. And, but anyways, I was like, anything you've done that's been different, I guess. And I was just curious, like if they've done anything different and yada, yada, yada. But she's like, we started changing everything from nutritional stuff at home, our stress levels at home. Obviously they're under chiropractic care as well too, in regards to that piece of it. But my point to the story is that the chiropractic, and this is a perfect way, kind of a segue, I guess, to the end here, is that the chiropractic adjustment is powerful. In my opinion, the philosophy behind what we do is even more powerful because it applies to every single thing you do in life. It applies to not just how you physically take care of yourself. It's mentally having an inside out, above down, inside out approach to life changes the game you play. And I think once patients truly get that, their belief system and their perspective on life changes, and therefore their behaviors change with it, and therefore their outcomes change with it. That the whole generational health and the whole generational mind shift that happens with that is a gift. It's a legacy thing that continues forever. And that's why I tell like any other our docs as well too, don't sell a patient short because you don't think they're going to sign up for care. They may never sign up for care, but what you tell them at the end of the day may shift how they think about something else in their life that's going to cause a trajectory shift for them at that point in time. So the philosophy of what we do, BJ Palmer was onto something way bigger than chiropractic back 100 and some odd years ago. So
well, great information today, Dr. Brett. Really appreciate you being on with me. And, I'll just close out by telling people this, that the big idea matters. And if you guys don't know what that is, go look for BJ Palmer's Big Idea. And I know I reference people to go do some research for themselves quite often during our show. I think people do need to know about the sacred trust. I think they need to know about the penalty of leadership. I think they need to know about some things that matter to chiropractic, subluxation, innate intelligence, universal intelligence. And they need to just keep on telling the story and keep adjusting people, because that's what sets chiropractic apart from every other profession in the world. And the chiropractic is a science of philosophy and art. It is a healing art, and there is a triune. There is the science, philosophy, and art of chiropractic, which I think is amazing. And it does help with the 3 T's: thoughts, traumas, and toxins. And people need chiropractic in their life. And you were saying this earlier, and I'll just close out on this, is don't just get into chiropractic because you want to have a job. Get into chiropractic because you want to have a life. And if your life is in this profession, then you can change lives, and it will change yours along the way too, just like it has yours.
Yep.
And appreciate you being on with me today.
Yes. Thank you for all you do, James. You're making a big ass difference in this profession, man. And we need more people out there willing to stand up and speak a little louder.
Well, I just love being a professional at what I do, and sharing stories about something that really matters, that most people don't have any idea what this profession means. They think that it's just about getting their bones popped or their back cracked but really it's about changing the future of humanity. And that's why I'm so invested into telling the story as much as I do. Some people might have tuned out a long time ago, but there's a lot of people that are tuning in. And that's what makes Chiro Hustle such a powerhouse nowadays. But love and appreciate you, man. I look forward to the day we actually get to meet you. And I'm going to close out by telling everybody this: you're just one story away. Keep hustling. And this is episode 411, closing out. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.